Hi, I'm Rob Matthews, Product Manager for the Essentials line here at Metalogix, and today we're going to be discussing ongoing management. There are four main disciplines that we find customers are most interested in when discussing management of Office 365. And those are Content-Centric Management, User-Centric Management, Service-Centric Management, and Office 365 Auditing. Within those four disciplines, there are 2 to 3 functionalities that we find are most enticing to them. We'll be discussing those and some use cases as well. For content-centric management, the first functionality is content creation and utilization reporting. Gathering relevant, content-specific information from Office 365 is a big deal. It's a time-consuming task that requires significant use of PowerShell, Excel, or third-party tools. Figuring out how the content is created, where it has been placed, and the effect that it has on SharePoint Online is vital to the health and efficiency of the entire Office 365 environment. When a company is using SharePoint Online as a document repository or a means of collaboration, there is a need to see how much content is in the environment, how it's deployed across SharePoint Online, what types of documents are deployed, and how that content is being used. Essentials can be used to analyze the content in the environment and provide graphical, interactive reports on the following: checked out documents count, content distribution, document counts, document extensions, document sizes, hierarchy, documents that require approval or checkout, and content type deployment and usage. The second functionality is content security and permissions reporting. And for any organization, when performing ongoing management of any Office 365 environment, content security is a top concern. Analyzing and reporting on the permissions assigned to documents and the sharing settings on the lists, libraries, and sites that determine access to said documents takes up a significant amount of any administrator's time. Building a more efficient collaboration environment for users to engage with requires that the information be cataloged and analyzed to return relevant information about the state of content security and sharing. So, when an organization is either moving to or already in Office 365, out of concern for security and a need to prevent unintended access or data breaches, the administrator can use Essentials to perform content security inventories. These inventories will need to generate reports on their permissioning and sharing settings that allow them to quickly identify and remediate potential issues, including content owned by orphan users, documents with external sharing, which users have permission to specific content, comparative permissions on selected documents, and granting, creating, copying, pasting, and revoking permissions. Finally, in content-centric management, there's business critical backup. And this is one of the functionalities that is most enticing to every company that we talk to. The day-to-day management of any environment requires that a significant amount of consideration be given to ensuring that content remains constantly available, regardless of service outages, loss of internet connection, corrupted files, or accidental or malicious deletion. It is absolutely vital that content be available in a reasonable amount of time, and that the restoration of said content doesn't disrupt workflows or destroy other unaffected content. There's also a need to remain in compliance with auditing requirements, which necessitates the retention of certain documents for a significant amount of time, in some cases up to or even exceeding 7 years. With the ability to normalize the documents and store them in a non-proprietary format, companies can store their backups in preferred storage indefinitely. Organizations can also utilize the backup functionality in Essentials to perform backups of business-critical content in bulk or granularly. The documents can be stored on premises, in network storage, a local file system, or in the cloud to ensure maximum availability. Essentials can perform backups of the following: SharePoint Online content and associated permissions, OneDrive for business content, Exchange Online mailboxes, and Skype for business conversation history. Moving on to user-centric management, the first functionality is tracking user engagement, also tracking sharing and document creation. In order to prevent content irrelevancy and what we call environmental bloat, administrators often need to determine how their users are collaborating, what they're creating, how the structure of Office 365 is affecting the day-to-day operations of the content owners. Essentials streamlines the discovery process by analyzing the environment and presenting graphical activity reports on site views, which users have created documents and how much content they've created, content activity, which users are accessing content and contributing to it, who has shared their own documents with other users and who they've shared that with, and which email domains users have granted access to. The next functionality is tracking user activity across the entire tenant. When reporting on the efficacy of Office 365 and providing metrics to prove user adoption, or even making a business case for expanding Office 365 and cloud investment in general, reports on user activity across the entire environment are vital. Essentials analyzes user activity and returns detailed, actionable reports on user activity on every piece of the environment, from a small library all the way to the entire tenant, without the need for PowerShell or Excel or even a manual composition created by cobbling together multiple reports. The third functionality within user-centric management is reporting on user permissions and sharing. Organizations need to ensure that users don't have access to more than they should, but still have access to all of the permissions necessary to do their jobs. Now, this requires a permission inventory that details what level of access each user has been granted by default and which users now have non-standard access explicitly shared with them. Essentials analyzes these security settings and reports on the following: user permissions, user sharing settings, which groups a user is a member of, which permissions have been granted to a user, which permissions have been granted to a group, which permissions a user has inherited as a member of a group or owner of a site, and which sites, lists, and libraries a user owns. Moving on to ServiceCentric Management, we have Office 365 license reporting and optimization, and service allocation and provisioning. When planning a move to Office 365 or implementing a new tenant, organizations consider the cost savings of moving away from managing infrastructure. But those are not the only cost savings, and the rest of the cost savings are dependent upon running an efficient Office 365 environment, and that means optimizing available resources. So rather than purchasing new blocks of licenses for users, cost-conscious administrators are able to use Essentials to view their available licenses, see which ones they have allocated to users, and see which allocated licenses are actually in use. For organizations that work with large numbers of contractors, rather than purchasing new license for contractors as they come and go, Essentials allows them to see which licenses are no longer in use and transfer the unused licenses to newly arriving contractors, rather than having to purchase new ones. For service allocation and provisioning, onboarding users is really where this lives. In all organizations, onboarding requires the provisioning of multiple Office 365 services. In larger organizations, the process of allocating service access to users and provisioning their accounts takes a significant amount of time and requires the use of CSVs, PowerShell, and a myriad of administrative portals within Office 365. Essentials removes that heavy lift by doing it in an automated fashion. It allows administrators to automatically allocate and provision services granularly or in bulk. And finally, we move to Office 365 auditing. So, what does Office 365 auditing mean? Well, in Office 365, auditing, like its counterpart in on-premises, tracks activity across the multiple services included in the environment. Auditing in Office 365 is a new feature that has been enabled through Microsoft's new Management API and is still being rolled out to customers' Office 365 tenants as of today. In any organization where detailed activity tracking and other audit capabilities are required for regulatory or internal policy compliance, the move to Office 365 presents a serious challenge as auditing is significantly more limited than in on-premises environments. Now that Microsoft has released the Management API, Essentials has the ability to perform significant auditing and remediative actions. So we're bringing the auditing functionality closer to that of on-premises deployments. So what exactly does Essentials do? Well, Essentials performs activity auditing on objects, for example content, users, workloads, and locations, which could be sites, lists, libraries, etc. It also returns audit information across all Office 365 services, including SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, Azure AD, Office 365 Groups, Skype for Business, and OneDrive for Business. Additionally, these audit reports tie into automated actions that can be kicked off from the same screen as the audit results, so you can take action without ever leaving the Essentials user interface. And this is a huge leg up on out of the box because Microsoft doesn't offer any actions. It's merely just detailed data.